A stray German shepherd discovered an infant in the cold. What did he do next? Rendered those in attendance dumbfounded. The forthcoming text will evoke tears. The most poignant rescue narrative that demonstrates animals occasionally exhibit greater humanity than humans ourselves. The wind roared through the desolate streets, cutting through both fur and skin. Shadow, as the villagers referred to him, walked across the desolate lane, his formerly robust German shepherd physique now diminished to a mere skeletal form. His ribs protruded beneath his tangled fur, and each inhalation elicited agonizing tremors along his spine as the frigid air permeated his bones. This was hardly the life he had envisioned for himself. 6 months prior, he possessed a residence, a family, and a cozy bed adjacent to a fireplace. 6 months prior, before their departure without him, they left behind only an empty food dish and diminishing recollections of tender touch. Shadow's paws bled as he advanced into the snow-laden lane. Each foot imprinted a subtle scarlet stain across the immaculate white surface, minor emblems of his anguish that would soon be concealed by new snowfall, obliterating any trace of his existence. His abdomen convulsed wildly. 3 days had elapsed since his last sustenance, when a half sandwich fell from a preoccupied businessman who remained oblivious to Shadow's presence. The hunger had transformed into a perpetual companion, more dependable than any human could ever be. The temperature had plummeted to perilously low levels that night. Weather advisories had cautioned individuals to remain indoors. Such exposure, even for a few minutes, could be lethal. Where might a stray dog seek refuge? The shelters that once embraced him suddenly rejected him. Excessively packed, excessively occupied, excessive numbers of strays akin to him. Shadow faltered, his foreleg collapsing beneath him. He collided with the snow, the cold permeating his chest. He remained still for a brief interval. What was the purpose? His body shook involuntarily, and his peripheral vision became obscured. This may be it. This alley may serve as his final resting place. He shut his eyes, experiencing the peculiar tranquility that accompanies surrender. The roaring wind appeared to diminish, and the pain in his abdomen subsided to a remote throb. Amidst the wind's lament, he discerned it. A lamentation, feeble, nearly indistinguishable. The ear of Shadow twitched. He elevated his head little, unsure whether he had conjured it in his imagination. Once more, a feeble, impotent sound. It is not a feline, not a rodent, divergent. A natural instinct awakened within him. Years of deliberate breeding. Numerous generations of defensive instincts have been activated. Shadow compelled himself to rise, his body objecting to each motion. The call resounded once more, compelling him to advance as if pulled by an unseen filament. He pursued the sound, staggering across brimming garbage and icy puddles. The weeping intensified, becoming increasingly frantic, the distinct tone of youth and fragility. Shadow rounded a corner and discovered a small bundle, partially concealed beneath a heap of empty trash bags adjacent to the service entrance of an abandoned building, wrapped in a tattered, dirty blanket. He advanced warily, his nose expanding. The package shifted. Shadow delicately prodded it with his nose, shifting a corner of the blanket aside. What he observed rendered him immobile. An infant, a human neonate, minuscule, delicate. Its skin had acquired a bluish hue, and its lips were nearly purple due to the cold. Its cries had diminished to lamentable whimpers, each breath discernible as a faint mist in the icy air. Shadow meticulously inhaled the child's scent. The infant could not have been older than a few days. Its eyes were tightly closed, its fists clenched against the cold, and its motions diminished with each passing second. He scanned the surroundings anxiously, seeking any indication of the mother or another individual. The alley was devoid of occupants. The only response to his wordless call for assistance was the wailing wind. The infant's wail diminished to a nearly imperceptible whimper. Shadow perceived the child's vitality waning, akin to a candle flame flickering in the breeze. He prodded the bundle once again, reflexively licking the infant's face. The infant's skin was frigid against his tongue. Shadow recognized, with the conviction born from adversity, that this diminutive human would not endure the night without assistance. A resolution crystallized in his mind. Not a human cognitive evaluation of advantages and disadvantages, but rather an intrinsic understanding, an entity that surpassed species boundaries, a comprehension of frailty, concerning abandonment, the world's harsh apathy. At this time, observing the forsaken youngster, Shadow perceived his own reflection. Another forsaken life considered valueless by those entrusted with its protection. The irony was not overlooked in his canine awareness. Humans had forsaken him to perish, and now he had discovered a human deserted by its own species. Shadow crouched, pressing against the bundle in an attempt to impart the scant warmth left in his deteriorating body. The infant emitted a more pronounced wail, as though acknowledging its solitude and anguish had diminished. For almost an hour, Shadow stayed there, his body arched defensively around the infant. However, he recognized that this was transient. The temperature persisted in declining. His corporeal warmth was insufficient. The infant required adequate warmth, nourishment, and attention. Shadow reached his conclusion. With remarkable delicacy, he grasped the edge of the blanket with his teeth and repositioned it, ensuring the youngster was entirely enveloped. He delicately lifted the bundle by the edge of the blanket, much to a mother wolf handling her pup. The weight, albeit minimal for a healthy German shepherd, exerted pressure on his weaker muscles. The infant emitted a startled cry, but did not resist. Shadow modified his hold, guaranteeing the infant's security without applying excessive pressure. He advanced with a cautious step, followed by another. The bundle oscillated little as he moved, although he swiftly adjusted his stride to maintain the baby's stability. Each step elicited anguish radiating through his legs, yet a renewed resolve had supplanted his previous resignation. Shadow was unaware of his destination. He possessed no specific destination, but a nebulous recollection of warmth, illumination, windows, and human voices that were neither loud nor profane. In this frigid metropolis, there must exist a somebody possessing sufficient compassion to rescue this youngster, even if no one had extended the same compassion towards him. The wind intensified, and snow commenced to descend more abundantly. The infant ceased sobbing, which Shadow instinctively saw as an ominous indication. He accelerated his speed, disregarding the pain from his lacerated paws and the fatigue threatening to engulf him. He exited the lane onto an uninhabited street. Streetlights provide an unsettling luminescence through the descending snow, highlighting vacant sidewalks and parked vehicles swiftly obscured by white coverings. Absence of individuals, closed establishments, and an atmosphere characterized solely by silence and chill. Shadow halted at an intersection, the bundle suspended from his jaws. In which direction? Or might he seek assistance in this desolate terrain? The baby's weight taxed his neck muscles, yet he declined to set the bundle down, even momentarily. The snow was descending more rapidly, the wind slicing through his fur with acute sharpness. He selected a path solely purely on instinct and proceeded onward. Each step became increasingly arduous. His legs quivered beneath him, poised to collapse at any instant. He persevered, taking one agonizing step after another, with the infant's survival hinging on his capacity to continue. 3 blocks later, Shadow observed a light in a window, not the frigid blue radiance of a television, but the warm yellow hue of a lamp. One individual was alert. One individual was present. Hope invigorated him, providing a fleeting surge of vitality. He accelerated his stride, his gaze concentrated on that symbol of possible redemption. As he neared the residence, a humble 2-story structure with a petite porch, Shadow discerned a shadow shifting behind the curtains. The house was unadorned yet appeared well-preserved, featuring a little garden now blanketed in snow. He arrived at the boundary of the land, still grasping the package. The infant had been silent for several minutes. Terror seized Shadow's heart. Was he tardy? The front door was elevated by 5 steps, an insurmountable obstacle given his present condition. Instead, Shadow maneuvered to the side of the house, where illumination emanated from an adjacent window, nearer to the ground. He observed a woman inside, navigating what seemed to be a kitchen. Shadow approached the window, and with his remaining strength, stood on his hind legs. He put a paw against the glass and emitted a desperate bark, the first sound he had produced all night. The woman sprang, startled by the abrupt sound. She pivoted toward the window, her expression shifting from trepidation to bewilderment at noticing the enormous dog waiting outside. Shadow barked once more with increased urgency before collapsing back on all fours from fatigue. He positioned the bundle meticulously on the ground, just beneath the illumination from the window, and barked once again. The woman approached the window with caution. Shadow retreated a few paces, intending for her to concentrate on the bundle rather than on him. He vocalized once more, scratching at the snow adjacent to the blanket. The woman's curiosity eclipsed her prudence. She scrutinized the glass more closely, attempting to see what the peculiar dog had delivered to her window. Upon recognizing what was concealed in the snow, her palm instinctively covered her mouth. Shadow observed her eyes expand in astonishment, followed by dread. She vanished from the window. In a poignant instant, Shadow believed she had forsaken them, yet another human retreating from anguish. However, moments later, the side door burst open, and the woman hurried out in house slippers and a robe, neglecting to wear a coat. She exclaimed in astonishment, collapsing to her knees beside the package. With quivering hands, she withdrew the blanket to unveil the baby's visage. She exclaimed in astonishment, swiftly cradling the newborn in her arms. She gazed at Shadow in bewilderment, seemingly unable to comprehend the unfolding events. "Did you do that? How did you accomplish that?" Words eluded her as she embraced the infant to her bosom, attempting to transfer her body warmth. Shadow wavered on his feet, his objective fulfilled. The debilitating weariness he had been battling ultimately consumed him. His legs gave way, and he fell onto the snow. "The infant is cold, and you—" The mom appeared conflicted, glancing between the infant and the dog again. "Remain here," she ordered, as though Shadow possessed any remaining strength to depart. "Please wait." She hurried back indoors with the infant. Shadow shut his eyes, sensing the chill permeate his body. He had accomplished his necessary tasks. The infant is now secure. That was the sole consideration. He was unaware of the duration that elapsed, whether seconds or minutes, before he sensed tender fingertips against his fur. The woman had reappeared, newly attired in a coat and boots. She had swathed the infant in what appeared to be multiple heavy blankets. "You rescued this child," she stated, her voice laden with sorrow. "I cannot abandon you here to perish." With remarkable power, she succeeded in lifting Shadow's emaciated body, grappling with his weight, yet resolutely persevering. "Enter, both of you, hero." The final recollection Shadow had before losing consciousness was the sensation of warmth, a cherished warmth, accompanied by a woman's voice urgently communicating on the phone about a miraculous event involving a stray dog and an abandoned infant. Maria Reyes had not slept for 36 hours, since her hospital shift concluded with the death of a patient, an elderly man who strongly resembled her grandfather. She returned to her vacant residence, prepared tea that remained untouched, and gazed at the kitchen wall till daybreak. She reported her illness for her upcoming shift. Throughout her 15-year nursing career, she had seldom been absent from work. Nevertheless, today she was unable to confront yet another death and the accompanying sorrow of a family. She sat in her kitchen as night descended once more, attempting to combat the void that had been expanding within her since her husband's demise 3 years prior. The abrupt bark at her window nearly caused her heart to cease. As paramedics hurried through her living room, Maria remained incredulous about the unfolding events. The newborn girl, estimated by paramedics to be about 3 days old, was being positioned in a portable warming unit, an oxygen mask obscuring her diminutive face. The lead paramedic explained that the infant's core temperature was perilously low while installing monitoring. However, She is exhibiting a positive response. If she had remained there for another hour, he did not complete the punishment. He was not obligated to. A veterinary technician residing 2 doors away was examining the German Shepherd on the opposite side of the room. Maria contacted him promptly after the paramedics, uncertain whom else to reach regarding the dog. The veterinary technician stated that the animal is critically emaciated, dehydrated, and exhibiting initial symptoms of hypothermia, while she enveloped the comatose creature in a foil emergency blanket. Numerous long-standing injuries were inadequately addressed. He has likely been homeless for several months. It is astonishing that he could still walk, much less get that infant to safety. Maria observed the infant and the dog, attempting to comprehend the situation in her living room. Will they be all right? Her inquiry included both patients. The paramedic assented with caution. The infant's vital signs are stabilized. We must transport her to the hospital for a comprehensive evaluation, but I believe she will recover. The veterinary technician exhibited diminished confidence. The dog's condition is precarious. He had exhausted all of his strength. I can transport him to the emergency clinic. Although he paused, the unarticulated truth lingering in the atmosphere. Emergency veterinarian care was expensive, and she was astray without an owner to bear the expenses. I will cover the cost, Maria stated unequivocally. Regardless of his requirements, he preserved the infant's life. She approached the canine, delicately caressing his cranium. He merits an opportunity. Detective James Morales arrived as both squads were preparing to take their patients. The police were promptly informed about the abandoned infant, as required by protocol. MS. Reyes, I comprehend that you discovered an infant. His dubious expression indicated uncertainty regarding the dispatcher's narrative. Not I, Maria elucidated, gesturing towards the dog being meticulously transferred onto a rudimentary stretcher. He summoned her to my window, barking until I became aware. The infant was ensconced in a blanket, nearly hypothermic. Detective Morales's eyebrows climbed almost to his hairline. Did the dog deliver the infant to you? I understand how it may appear, Maria asserted defensively, but I witnessed it firsthand. The dog preserved her life. The detective extracted his notebook, his demeanor still skeptical. Did you observe anyone else? Is there no individual who could have discovered the baby and utilized the dog for its delivery? Maria maintained that there was no one else. The dog is positioned at my window, holding a parcel in its mouth, as if he have complete awareness of his actions. As the paramedics transported the infant to the ambulance, one of them shouted over, "Madam, will you be attending the hospital? As the discoverer, you ought to assist social services." Maria appeared conflicted, observing the puppy being gently transported to the veterinary technician's vehicle. The veterinary technician instructed to proceed with the infant. I will ensure his well-being and provide you with information. I assure you. With a profound sense of sorrow, Maria seized her pocketbook and coat. His name is Shadow, she stated abruptly, the word arising instinctively. That is the designation I am using for him. Kindly inform the veterinarians that Shadow is a hero. As the peculiar procession departed from her residence, comprising 2 ambulances, one for a diminutive child and the other for an emaciated dog, Maria pondered the sequence of circumstances that had converged them all on this freezing evening. What were the odds of a strayed dog discovering an abandoned infant? Would the dog lead the youngster to the window of a nurse who remained at home solely due to grief preventing her from working? It appeared unfeasible. As she ascended into the ambulance alongside the diminutive, struggling figure of the newborn, Maria recognized that she was observing an occurrence transcending mere coincidence, an occurrence that would render individuals speechless upon hearing about it. Unbeknownst to her and others, this night marked the inception of a narrative that would transform not just her existence, but also the collective perception of loyalty, love, and the indomitable connection among the most unlikely of heroes inside the community. The emergency veterinary facility operated with subdued efficiency as Dr. Elena Patel assessed the unresponsive German Shepherd on her examination table. 2 decades in emergency veterinary practice had revealed several instances of neglect and maltreatment. However, there was something about this dog that profoundly affected her. She informed the vet technician who had brought him in that his condition is more severe than she initially anticipated. Acute starvation, dehydration, infected paw lesions, and initial hypothermia. He also has multiple pre-existing injuries. An inadequately healed rib fracture with potential internal scarring. She delicately glided her hands over the dog's pronounced ribs. He has been struggling for survival for some months. It is astonishing that he possessed the strength to carry anything, much less an infant. The narrative had already disseminated across the clinic. A stray German shepherd discovering and rescuing an abandoned infant. The majority of the personnel maintained skepticism, presuming the reality was less extraordinary. It is possible that one individual utilized the stray as a convenient means of delivery, or that the nurse exaggerated the account. Dr. Patel expressed uncertainty. Throughout her work, she observed animals executing behaviors that eluded straightforward explanation. The dog's physical condition conveyed a narrative of remarkable perseverance. Administer intravenous fluids to him without delay, she directed. Administer warm saline, medications for the paw infections, and conduct blood testing to assess organ function. I require him to be under continuous surveillance. While her staff endeavored to stabilize Shadow, Dr. Patel entered her office to contact Maria Reyes for an update. The dialogue was succinct yet sincere. The dog's condition was dire, treatment would be costly, and there were no assurances. Do everything within your power, Maria responded promptly. I will assume all expenses. The dog is a hero. The term lingered in Dr. Patel's thoughts as she proceeded to assess Shadow, the hero. The title seems burdensome for this damaged being struggling for survival. However, an impetus compelled him to transcend his physical boundaries and instinct for self-preservation in order to rescue a life more fragile than his own. What prompted your actions, young man? She murmured while assessing his vital signs. What prompted your concern when others remained indifferent? Shadow lay unconscious, his respiration faint yet consistent. Dr. Patel tenderly rested his hand on his head. Combat champion, she whispered. The world requires more individuals like you. At Mercy General Hospital, the infant girl, provisionally named Jane Doe, had been stabilized in the neonatal intensive care unit. Her diminutive form, now ensconced in thermal blankets and linked to monitoring apparatus, struggled to recuperate from acute hypothermia and exposure. Dr. Thomas Chun, the attending physician, briefed Maria and Detective Morales in a compact consulting room adjacent to the NICU. She is exhibiting a positive response to treatment. The core temperature is almost normal, respiration is consistent, and initial assessments indicate no irreversible harm to essential organs. He halted, his demeanor becoming gentler. Her survival is nothing short of miraculous. Based on the condition of the umbilical cord, she is estimated to be 2 to 3 days old. Are there any indications of abuse or neglect in addition to the abandonment? Detective Morales inquired, his notebook ajar. Dr. Chun disapproved by shaking his head. In fact, no. In addition to exposure to the elements, she seems to have had fundamental neonatal care. The umbilical cord was appropriately severed and managed. She is marginally underweight, however not critically so. She was presumably fed during the preceding 6 to 8 hours before being discovered. Maria, having observed the infant through the NICU glass, redirected her attention to the discussion. Was she previously under someone's care before being abandoned in that alley? It seems that is the case, Dr. Chin affirmed. This does not conform to the usual characteristics of a frantic abandonment at birth. An individual cared for this youngster for several days before deciding to abandon her. Detective Morales recorded observations, his brow knitted in concentration. This complicates matters and diminishes the likelihood of a teenage mother acting independently or in a state of fear. Deliberate abandoning following days of care implies a completely other motive. What is the duration of her hospital stay? Maria inquired, her gaze returning to the diminutive figure in the incubator. A minimum of several days for monitoring. Upon her medical clearance, social services will assume custody throughout the ongoing inquiry. Dr. Chen examined Maria's visage. You appear significantly concerned about her well-being. Maria exhibited a melancholic smile. I suppose I am. Between her and the canine that rescued her, she faltered, unable to articulate the peculiar bond she sensed with both forsaken spirits. Detective Morales shut his notebook. I require access to any surveillance footage near your residence. MS. Reyes. Although I do not question your narrative, we must ascertain that no other individuals participated in delivering the infant to your residence. Maria assented with a nod. However, my area lacks several security cameras. The area is predominantly residential. Morales also stated that we will examine traffic cameras in the area. I must submit my preliminary report and reach out to social services. They will seek to interview you as the discoverer. Upon the detective's departure, Maria redirected her gaze to the window. The infant's diminutive chest ascended and descended in a methodical manner, each inhalation a testimonial to her determination to survive and to the improbable protector who had guaranteed the continuation of those breaths. Do you find it credible? She inquired of Dr. Chun, who had stayed by her side, whether a stray dog had discovered her and transported her to safety. The physician contemplated the inquiry meticulously. Medical school instructs us to seek the most straightforward explanation. However, in 2 decades of practice, I have realized that the most straightforward explanation is not invariably the accurate one. He observed the infant. Occasionally, the cosmos operates in manners that elude straightforward categorization or explanation. Maria's phone rang. It was the veterinarian clinic. She responded promptly, distancing herself from the window for confidentiality. Dr. Chen observed her countenance transition from apprehension to measured relief. Upon concluding the call, tears welled in her eyes. The dog inquired about the positive news. He has been stabilized, Maria elucidated. He remains unconscious. However, his vital signs are showing improvement. The veterinarian indicates that it is premature to offer assurances, yet the animal exhibits a robust determination to survive. She brushed aside a tear akin to this small one. Shadow fluctuated between states of consciousness. The frigid cold had been supplanted by warmth, and for the first time in months, the persistent pangs of hunger had diminished. Indistinct sensations perceived, tender hands, soothing words, an unfamiliar odor of medicine, an antiseptic. In his semi-conscious condition, memories drifted like bits. A family that had cherished him, children who had engaged in play with him, the bewilderment of abandonment. Subsequent recollections, the endeavor to endure on streets devoid of compassion, the incessant quest for sustenance and refuge, the progressive deterioration of his formerly robust physique. Ultimately, the latest recollection, a diminutive package, a diminishing wail, a frantic expedition through snow and tempest. The infant. What occurred to the infant? This notion pierced Shadow's nebulous awareness with unexpected lucidity. He required knowledge. The compulsion to safeguard remained undiminished following his rescue. His eyes gradually opened, the glaring lights of the veterinarian facility briefly disorienting him. He attempted to stand, but discovered his body was too feeble to comply with his directives. A muted whimper emanated from his throat. Almost instantly, a face emerged above him, a woman clad in a white coat, her look one of surprise yet gentleness. "Greetings, Dr. Patel," uttered gently. "Observe who has chosen to return to our midst." Shadow's eyes, despite being obscured by fatigue, possessed an intensity that captivated the veterinarian. These were not the blank eyes of an animal simply endeavoring to exist. The stare possessed intent, a query quite human in its intricacy. "Dr. Patel remarked, you are quite the fighter when assessing his vital signs. Your friend Maria has contacted you 3 times today to inquire about your well-being, and the nurses at Mercy General report that the baby is thriving, attributable to your efforts. Upon the reference to the infant, Shadow's ears subtly elevated. Dr. Patel observed the reaction with intrigue. She stated carefully that the infant is secure, observing his reaction. She is becoming increasingly stronger each hour. Shadow's physique visibly relaxed, and his respiration became more regular. Dr. Patel stepped back, astonished. 2 decades in veterinary care had imparted to her the understanding that animals comprehended much more than humans frequently acknowledged. This degree of understanding, along with the evident compassion for a human newborn, tested even her open-minded viewpoint. She annotated his chart and then tenderly caressed his head. "Repose now. Champion, you have merited it." Shadow's eyes shut once more, succumbing to slumber. This time, it was restorative slumber rather than the perilous unconsciousness caused by hypothermia and fatigue. The news emerged the following morning. A local journalist, eavesdropping on a dialogue among medical personnel, initiated an inquiry. By midday, the initial article was published online. Extraordinary rescue. Stray canine aids abandoned infant. By dusk, all local news stations had reported the tale. Security camera from a building 2 blocks away from Maria's residence captured a blurred yet unmistakable image of Shadow transporting the bundled infant through the snow. The footage dispelled any uncertainty regarding the dog's involvement in the rescue. As the narrative disseminated, social media surged. The security footage, disseminated millions of times within hours, depicted the malnourished German shepherd laboring through deep snow, with a blanket-wrapped bundle delicately held in his teeth. Resolve is apparent in each arduous stride. Hashtags gain prominence. Hero Shadow, Canine Rescuer, Extraordinary Salvage. Maria, unready for the unexpected scrutiny, discovered reporters stationed outside her residence in the veterinarian clinic. The police established a cordon at the hospital to prevent curious bystanders and media from interfering with medical services. Detective Morales, currently leading the official investigation, conducted a succinct press conference, affirming the fundamental details and imploring anyone with information regarding the abandoned infant to step forward. "We are examining all potential leads," he said to the gathered press. "Our principal interests are ascertaining the identity of the infant, contacting her parents or relatives, and comprehending the circumstances that resulted in her abandonment." Upon inquiry regarding Shadow, the detective's professional composure weakened marginally. The animal's activities seemed crucial in preserving the child's life. "I shall defer the interpretations to others. Our emphasis continues to be on the criminal inquiry." The inquiries persisted, becoming progressively sensational. Did the dog indeed fend off coyotes to safeguard the infant? Did the dog infiltrate a building to locate the infant? Was the dog formerly a service animal trained for rescue missions? Morales abbreviated the press conference, declining to address rumors. The public had already accepted the miracle narrative. Contributions surged for Shadow's medical treatment, for the infant's future, for the community animal shelter. The narrative of a forsaken dog rescuing an abandoned infant resonated universally, beyond the typical skepticism of online culture. Within the veterinarian clinic, Shadow remained oblivious to his sudden notoriety. His condition had sufficiently stabilized for the most essential procedures. However, his recuperation would be prolonged. Prolonged starvation had significantly debilitated his body, and exposure to harsh cold had additionally strained his system. Dr. Patel, protecting her patient from the commotion outside, concentrated on the medical marvels occurring beneath her supervision. Shadow commenced consuming modest quantities of specialized high-calorie nourishment formulated for impoverished animals. His diseased paws were reacting positively to the medication. Crucially, his blood tests indicated no irreversible organ damage, despite his extended distress. She informed Maria during one of her visits that he possesses a fighting spirit. Certain animals simply act. They resolve to persist, irrespective of logical reasoning. Maria positioned herself next to Shadow's bed, tenderly caressing his head. The German shepherd was alert yet lethargic, his gaze tracking her actions with subdued astuteness. Maria informed him that the infant was also doing well, confident that he comprehended her message. She is referred to as Miracle Jane until her actual name is revealed. It is well acknowledged that you preserve her life. The tail of Shadow thumped feebly against the cover. Maria reflected, her voice becoming softer. Once you are sufficiently recovered to depart, perhaps you would consider accompanying me to my residence. I possess a residence with a garden. It may be modest, nevertheless it provides warmth, and you would no longer have to experience solitude. Upon hearing these remarks, Shadow elevated his head slightly. His gaze locked into Maria's face with an intensity that had her breathless. Subsequently, with intentional exertion, he extended his paw and positioned it upon her hand. Dr. Patel, positioned at the doorway, shook her head in astonishment. In 2 decades of work, she remarked softly, I have never encountered anything quite like him. Maria delicately grasped Shadow's paw in her palm. Is that affirmative? She inquired, tears accumulating in her eyes. Shadow's tail struck the ground once more, with greater intensity this time. Subsequently, things became resolved, Maria remarked, dabbing her eyes. You rescued Miracle Jane. Allow me to rescue you. The inquiry into the abandoned infant's identity encountered an impasse. Notwithstanding widespread media coverage and calls for information, no individual has emerged to claim the infant or furnish specifics regarding her origins. Detective Morales, examining security footage from all cameras within a 10-block radius of the discovery spot, found no definitive evidence. The alley in where Shadow discovered the infant lacked surveillance coverage. The closest camera recorded only Shadow appearing with a bundle already in his mouth. She seemed to materialize unexpectedly, Morales informed his partner, Detective Susan Kim, as they examined the area's maps. No evidence of someone transporting an infant, no forsaken vehicles, nothing. What is the status of the blanket? Kim proposed. Are there any identification markings or manufacturing labels? Common cotton baby blanket, readily accessible at numerous retailers, Morales sighed. The laboratory detected residues of laundry detergent, indicating recent washing, although it is a prevalent brand. Moreover, the dog provides us with no leads, Kim reflected. Without a microchip or collar, there is no means to ascertain his origin or the duration of his presence in that location. Morales reclined, exasperated. Social media abounds with extravagant hypotheses, with individuals asserting that the dog was a product of supernatural intervention, possessed a unique bond with the infant, or served as a reincarnated spirit guardian, prompting a smile from Kim. Individuals are enamored with miracles, particularly those featuring a visually appealing protagonist. The security film of him transporting her through the blizzard is compelling material. Indeed, miracles do not assist us in identifying Jane Doe or locating the one who abandoned her to perish, Morales lamented. Without such, we are unable to ascertain whether to initiate criminal proceedings. What is the hospital's current assessment of her condition? Having fully recovered from the exposure, a typical, healthy newborn. Meanwhile, Morales perused his notes. Social Services is now receiving inquiries from individuals interested in fostering or adopting her. What about the dog? Demonstrating daily improvement as reported by the veterinarian. Maria Reyes, the nurse who discovered them, intends to adopt him upon his release. Morales shut his notebook. At least that segment of the narrative concludes positively. Kim proposed that this may be all we receive regarding this matter. Not every case concludes satisfactorily. Morales was discontented. The notion of desertion troubled him. The disparity between appropriate initial care for the newborn and the ensuing fatal neglect. It deviated from typical patterns, leading him to assume that the narrative encompassed more than merely a mother unwilling to keep her child. He resolved to examine hospital data for recent births. Concentrate on instances where the mother departed contrary to medical counsel or presented dubious identification. That is a remote possibility, Kim said. If she delivered outside a hospital, we will discover no evidence. Currently, we possess just long shots, Morales responded. Someone of knowledge about the identity of this infant, and I am determined to locate them. Precipitation in the form of snow occurred once more that evening. Less severe than the blizzard that had almost resulted in 2 fatalities, yet sufficient to remind the community of winter's hold. In her hospital room, Maria occupied a rocking chair adjacent to the window, observing the snowflakes cascade past the glass. Miracle Jane slumbered tranquilly in her arms, swathed in a suitably warm hospital blanket. Social services requested Maria, a registered nurse, and the individual who discovered the infant to offer temporary care throughout the child's hospitalization. The arrangement was atypical, yet the media scrutiny rendered this a distinctive situation. Maria swayed softly, examining the baby's flawless attributes. 10 diminutive fingers, 10 diminutive toes, fragile eyelashes resting upon gentle cheeks. Who could have abandoned this marvel in the cold? What conditions could potentially warrant such an action? As a nurse, Maria had observed numerous instances of human suffering and fortitude. She had observed families withstand inconceivable adversities and had witnessed people struggle against insurmountable challenges. In this city, an individual was linked to this youngster, having made a dire and regrettable decision. Her thoughts wandered to Shadow, recuperating across the city. 2 forsaken individuals linked by serendipity, destiny, or an incomprehensible force beyond human comprehension. What were the chances that a malnourished, partially frozen dog would discover an abandoned infant? That he would possess the fortitude and resolve to transport her to safety? That he would select Maria's window above all other locations? The infant twitched in her embrace, minuscule hands flexing before returning to slumber. Maria repositioned the blanket, guaranteeing the infant's optimal warmth and comfort. "You are secure now," she murmured. "Both you and Shadow. Regardless of future events, you will never experience abandonment again." Outside the window, snow persisted in its descent, enveloping the city in a pristine layer of white, nature's method of providing second chances, concealing the past behind the assurance of something novel and unblemished. Maria was uncertain about the future prospects for her improbable charges. As she cradled the slumbering newborn, one conviction solidified in her heart. These 2 troubled individuals had arrived at her for a purpose, and she would not disappoint them. The sunlight adorned Maria's neighborhood with gentle shades of pink and gold, illuminating the tiny assembly outside her unassuming 2-story residence. 3 days had elapsed since the extraordinary rescue, and media attention had only escalated. News vans occupied the tranquil street. Reporters grasping coffee mugs stamped their feet against the early cold, while inquisitive neighbors feigned dog-walking or mail-checking, surreptitiously observing the residents that had become the focal point of an international narrative. Within her kitchen, Maria busied herself, readying for what was anticipated to be an exceptional day. Shadow was returning home. Following 3 days of rigorous veterinary treatment, Dr. Patel determined that the German Shepherd was sufficiently stable for release, but his rehabilitation would last for several weeks. Maria dedicated yesterday to enhancing her house by acquiring a luxurious dog bed, specialized food, meds, and toys. She rearranged furniture to establish clear routes for a frail dog and built baby gates to deter him from attempting the stairs until he regained his strength. A tap at the door signaled the entrance of Dr. Patel and her veterinary technician. They volunteered to personally transfer Shadow, circumventing the media frenzy at the clinic. "Prepared for your new housemate?" Dr. Patel inquired with a smile as Maria guided them through the rear entrance. Fully prepared, Maria responded, guiding them to the living area where the dog bed was positioned adjacent to the fireplace. What was his condition this morning? Vigilant, enthusiastic to depart. He appeared to be aware that he was heading to a significant destination. Dr. Patel oversaw as her technician meticulously transported Shadow into the living room. Notwithstanding his enhanced condition, the German Shepherd continued to exhibit weakness, his formerly robust physique remaining agonizingly emaciated. Upon being positioned on the new bed, Shadow examined his environment with perceptive eyes. His eyes were locked on Maria, and his tail softly struck the pillow. Dr. Patel stated that he would leave the medication and comprehensive care instructions, leaving a bag on a coffee table. He must consume small meals regularly, administer his medicines by daily, and have his bandages replaced every day. She knelt alongside Shadow, inspecting his paws once more. His physical recuperation will require time, but I am more apprehensive about his psychological condition. Maria positioned herself on the floor adjacent to the dog bed. What is your meaning? Abandoned strays frequently exhibit trust issues, fear of humans, anxiety, and occasionally violence, as noted by Dr. Patel. His conduct with the infants indicates he may be an anomaly, although remain vigilant for possible behavioral difficulties. Maria tenderly caressed Shadow's head. He has endured considerable adversity. We will approach it incrementally. Following the issuance of final directives and the arrangement of a subsequent appointment, Dr. Patel and her technicians discreetly exited through the rear entrance, circumventing the reporters assembled at the front. Maria positioned herself next Shadow's bed, alone. She gently uttered, "Welcome home." Shadow answered by gradually and laboriously elevating his head to rest on her lap, his dark eyes fixed intently on her face. She assured you that you are now secure. Resisting tears. No more backstreets, no more chill, no more deprivation. She persisted in caressing his head, contemplating the events that had introduced this extraordinary creature into her existence. I wish to convey something significant. Miracle Jane is thriving. The physicians indicate that she will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow. Upon the reference to the infant, Shadow's ears elevated marginally. Social Services is currently attempting to locate her family. In the interim, they have requested that I serve as her temporary foster parent. Maria exhibited a smile. I affirmed, indicating that the two of you will soon be together. What is your assessment of that? Shadow's tail wagged with increased vigor, prompting Maria to giggle amidst her tears. I shall interpret that as consent. A disturbance outside captured her attention at the window. A police vehicle arrived, and Detective Morales maneuvered through the assembled press, disregarding their shouted inquiries. Shortly thereafter, Maria's doorbell sounded. Apologies for the welcome party, Morales remarked as she opened the door, indicating the reporters behind him. May I enter? I possess updates regarding the case. Maria guided him to the kitchen, allowing for a quiet conversation while maintaining a view of Shadow in the nearby living room. Morales noted the arrival of your new roommate, casting a glance at the German Shepherd. This morning, Maria provided confirmation. What has occurred? Have you located the infant's family? Morales extracted his notebook. Not precisely, but we have identified her mother. His countenance was severe. A 19-year-old female called Lucia Mendez. She was brought to Mercy General last night due to problems arising from childbirth. Are there any complications? However, the infant was delivered some days prior. Precisely. She experienced an untreated postpartum hemorrhage and nearly succumbed before her roommate discovered her unconscious and contacted emergency services. Morales turned a page in his notepad. Upon identifying the signs of recent deliveries without the presence of an infant, the ER staff reached out to us. Maria descended into a kitchen chair. Is she well? She will recuperate physically. He displayed indifference. She has been sedated for treatment. Nonetheless, prior to losing consciousness, she affirmed that the infant was hers and inquired whether the dog had rescued her. Was she aware of Shadow? Maria inhaled sharply. That is what complicates everything, Morales continued. Her disjointed remarks suggest she observed the dog locate the infant. She did not forsake her child arbitrarily. She intentionally positioned the infant in a location she thought the dog would discover her. Maria endeavored to comprehend this knowledge. She employed Shadow as a form of rescue service. That is extraordinary, Morales stated gravely, possibly literally. Her roommate recalls recent erratic behavior, paranoid declarations, refusal to pursue medical attention following a home birth, and indications of severe postpartum psychosis. What is the rationale for abandoning the infant initially? Why not transport her to a hospital or fire station? Safe harbor laws exist. At that point, the narrative takes a sinister turn, Morales stated. Lucia cohabited with her boyfriend, the father of the child. The roommate asserts that he has been progressively controlling and abusive. Upon the baby's birth, he allegedly threatened to harm both individuals if Lucia did not terminate the pregnancy, allowing her to continue working and financially supporting him. That is dreadful, Maria murmured. Miguel Santos, the boyfriend, has a history of domestic violence and drug-related offenses. Morales stated that we are now searching for him. Lucia became convinced he would murder the baby if she utilized traceable formal routes. In her agitated condition, she became preoccupied with a stray puppy she had been covertly nourishing. Shadow, Maria exhaled, gazing at the German shepherd resting in the living room. Perhaps. She informed her roommate that a dog in the vicinity was dispatched by angels to safeguard individuals. Morales declined in agreement. At her delusional condition, she was convinced that if she abandoned the infant at a location accessible to the dog, it would transport her to safety. He did, Maria remarked, astonished by the disclosure. Defying all expectations, her illusion materialized. Morales shut his notebook. Psychiatric experts will assess whether she was legally crazy at the time she made these judgments. The boyfriend will be charged if we can link him to threats made against the infant. What about the infant? What is her current situation? That is, in fact, the additional purpose for my presence, Morales stated. As you're already approved as a temporary foster parent and acquainted with her care, Social Services seeks to formalize the arrangement while Lucia's case is ongoing. The infant's medical staff asserts that stability and continuity of care are vital at this moment. Maria experienced a sense of overwhelm. Therefore, I would be responsible for her care until her mother's circumstances are rectified. Morales warned of a potentially extended duration. Permanent custody arrangements may be required based on Lucia's psychological condition and legal results. Would you consider that possibility? Prior to Maria's response, a faint whimper emanated from the living room. Shadow elevated his head, observing them keenly through the doorway, as if comprehending the seriousness of their discourse. Maria stated gently that she believed both of us would. By that evening, Maria's uncomplicated existence had undergone a complete transformation. Subsequent to Detective Morales' departure, social workers arrived to finalize the emergency foster placement documentation. Reporters maintained their watch outside, now accompanied by supporters who left teddy animals, flowers, and dog treats on her porch. Shadow maintained vigilance throughout the day, observing the events with remarkable acuity. Notwithstanding his debilitated condition, he seemed resolute in comprehending all events occurring in his vicinity, particularly those regarding the infant. As Sophia acclimated to her new temporary residence, Detective Morales and his crew escalated their pursuit of Miguel Santos, the individual whose purported threats had supposedly precipitated the baby's desertion. Hospital security was intensified around Lucia Mendez, who continued to undergo psychiatric evaluation during her recovery from physical trauma. In a dilapidated apartment complex throughout the city, Miguel Santos hurriedly packed, cramming garments into a duffel bag. The television emitted loud sounds in the background, with a news anchor reporting on the recent updates on the miraculous baby case. Authorities are currently seeking Miguel Santos, the partner of Lucia Mendez and the father of the infant discovered abandoned during the blizzard last week. Santos, possessing previous convictions for domestic violence, is sought for interrogation. Miguel swore, hurling a bottle at the television. The narrative had escalated beyond his management. He instructed Lucia to dispose of the baby, to abandon it in a location where it would remain undiscovered. Instead, she had generated a media phenomenon featuring a heroic canine and a global audience. His phone rang. A pal alerted him that the cops had been inquiring at their customary gathering places. Time was expiring. He seized his luggage and car keys, then hesitated at a drawer adjacent to the entrance. Following a brief pause, he extracted a handgun, verifying its loaded status before securing it in his waistband. If law enforcement were pursuing him, he would not surrender readily. If Lucia had spoken, identifying him as the individual who insisted on the baby's abandonment, he may have been compelled to silence her permanently. An unmarked police vehicle entered the apartment complex, unnoticed by Miguel. Detective Morales and his partner readied themselves to approach the unit, oblivious to the fact that their suspect was already armed and desperate, a deadly mix that would soon escalate the narrative to its most hazardous juncture. The news of Miguel Santos's escape disseminated rapidly across law enforcement networks. The altercation at his residence concluded with 2 officers hurt, one critically, and the culprit absconding in a stolen vehicle. An instant all-points advisory was sent, cautioning that Santos was armed and highly perilous. Detective Morales, sustaining only minor injuries, orchestrated the manhunt from the hospital while undergoing treatment. His foremost worry extended beyond merely apprehending a perilous fugitive. It was safeguarding prospective targets. Santos issued overt threats towards Lucia during his escape, pledging to complete his initial intentions. If he attributed his bad circumstances to the dog and baby, Maria's household could also be jeopardized. Morales commanded continuous protection at both areas, grimacing while a nurse sutured a laceration on his forehead. Security personnel in the hospital for Lucia Mendez and patrol units stationed outside Maria Reyes' residence. This individual is in a state of desperation and possesses nothing to forfeit. Within the hour, police vehicles were positioned outside Maria's residence. Officers knocked on her door, articulating the scenario in precisely calibrated language to prevent panic while assuring she comprehended the potential harm. The police informed her that they did not believe he would come here. His principal objective seems to be Lucia, but as a precautionary measure, we will sustain a presence outside until his capture. Maria expressed her gratitude, then shut the door, her heart pounding. She verified that all doors and windows were firmly shut before observing Sophia, who slept tranquilly in her cot, oblivious to the threat posed by her biological father. In the living room, Shadow had ascended from his bed despite his frailty, his stance vigilant, ears pricked, as though he could perceive the building tension inside the household. "It is acceptable," Maria informed him, crouching next to him. "The police are present. We are secure." Shadow did not return to his bed. He laboriously approached the front window to examine the street. His body language had transformed entirely, no longer like a recuperating patient, but rather a vigilant protector. Maria witnessed the metamorphosis with a blend of astonishment and apprehension. Shadow's protective instincts had activated. However, he was not in a suitable physical state for such vigilance. She implored him to relax, attempting to direct him back to his bed. "You are still in the process of healing." Shadow resisted with subtlety yet determination. He would not be swayed from his self-assigned position. Lucia Mendez resided in a separate room at Mercy General Hospital, with security stationed outside her door. Physical recovery had advanced satisfactorily, although her psychological condition remained tenuous. Severe postpartum psychosis, exacerbated by intense stress and trauma, had disrupted her perception of reality. Periods of clarity fluctuated with paranoid delusions and significant emotional turmoil. Dr. Sarah Williams, the mental specialist assigned to her case, sat beside her bed, examining notes from their sessions. "You are advancing, Lucia," she remarked softly. "The drug is aiding in the stabilization of your brain chemistry. What is your current emotional state?" Lucia gazed at the ceiling, her dark eyes filled with torment. "Is Sophia genuinely secure?" "They assert that she is. Yet at times I suspect this is merely a statement intended to placate me." Dr. Williams informed her that she is quite safe. She is accompanied by a nurse named Maria Reyes, the individual whose residence the dog led Sophia to. Maria possesses expertise in infant care, and Sophia is flourishing. "Is the angelic dog accompanying them?" Dr. Williams had adapted to operate inside Lucia's framework instead of outright contesting her beliefs. The German Shepherd resides with them as well. His name is Shadow, and he is recuperating from his experience. Tears cascaded down Lucia's visage. I was certain he would save her. I had been providing him sustenance for weeks. He was exceedingly polite and exceptionally intelligent. Upon Miguel's threat, Maria ceased her actions, her respiration quickening. Upon his threat to harm Sophia unless I eliminated her, I realized that the dog was our sole salvation. Dr. Williams stated cautiously that you made a decision in an untenable situation. You were gravely unwell, Lucia, and apprehensive about your baby's welfare. I observed from behind the dumpster as Lucia proceeded, her voice descending to a whisper. I observed the dog locate her. I observed the meticulous manner in which he lifted her. I trailed him for several streets, concealing myself in doorways, ensuring he was escorting her to a secure location. New tears cascaded. I was unable to comprehend fully. I was experiencing significant hemorrhaging and dizziness. Nevertheless, I hoped he would encounter a suitable individual. Dr. Williams recorded observations. These particulars corresponded with the information that law enforcement had acquired from surveillance film. A shadowy figure trailed at a distance, while the shadow transported the baby across the snow. Dr. Williams stated that your prayers were answered, and if you are sufficiently recovered, you'll have the opportunity to see Sophia. Lucia's countenance abruptly soured. Miguel will perpetually seek us out. He asserted that a child would disrupt everything, incur excessive expenses, and render me ineffectual to him. Her hands grasped the bedsheet. He will murder her if he locates her, and will also eliminate me. Dr. Williams told her that Miguel cannot access her here. The hospital is secured, and law enforcement is currently conducting a hunt for him. However, Lucia's eyes exhibited an unfocused gaze indicative of her regressing into hallucination. Only the celestial canine can safeguard her now, she said. Thus, God dispatched Jesus to us. 3 days elapsed without any indication of Miguel Santos. The police sustained their precautionary surveillance at both sites. However, as the manhunt extended to adjacent states, the imminent threat appeared to lessen. Numerous officers suspected that Santos had completely absconded from the vicinity, favoring evasion above retribution. At Maria's residence, life adopted a new cadence focused on newborn Sophia's need and Shadow's rehabilitation. The German Shepherd's health progressively improved, with his wounds healing and strength gradually returning to his gaunt physique. Dr. Patel, who visited every other day to assess his progress, was impressed by his resolve. He is experiencing weight gain at an accelerated rate. She informed Maria during the examination, and his blood tests indicate significant improvement. However, what impresses me the most is his concentration. She gestured at Shadow, who had situated himself adjacent to Sophia's portable bassinet in the living room. He is directing all his energies towards recovery and monitoring her well-being. The connection between the dog and the infant had only intensified. Shadow insisted on attending every feeding, diaper change, and nap. He would recline alongside Sophia's cot or crib, his eyes monitoring every movement, his ears attuned to her faintest sound. When she wept, he would pace nervously until Maria addressed her needs. When unfamiliar individuals arrived at the residence, even those deemed welcome, such as Dr. Patel or social workers, Shadow placed himself between them and the infant until he ascertained there were no danger. It is unprecedented, Maria confessed to her sister Elena, who had arrived to assist with domestic chores. It appears he comprehends precisely who she is and what she requires. Perhaps he does, Elena proposed, observing Shadow tenderly nuzzle Sophia's diminutive hand during her tummy time on a blanket. They say animals sense things we can't. Maybe he knows they saved each other. The media fascination had evolved from a local human interest story to an international phenomenon. Producers from major networks and streaming services had approached Maria with offers for exclusive rights to the story. A children's book author had already published Shadow's journey, with proceeds benefiting both animal rescue organizations and child welfare programs. Social media accounts dedicated to Shadow and Sophia had millions of followers eagerly awaiting daily updates. Through it all, Maria maintained firm boundaries, limiting media access, and focusing on creating stability for her unexpected household. The social worker assigned to Sophia's case had become an ally in protecting their privacy while navigating the complex legal situation. Lucia's doctors report gradual improvement. The social worker, Diane Ferris, explained during a home visit, but her recovery will be lengthy. The courts have approved continued foster placement here, with supervised visits for Lucia when her doctors approve. And the father? Maria inquired softly, glancing at Shadow, who observed their dialogue from his location near Sophia's bassinet. Diane responded, "There is still no indication of him. If he remains unapprehended within the designated time frame, his parental rights may be revoked due to abandonment and the recorded threats." Maria nodded, contemplating the ramifications. What had commenced as an emergency rescue had transformed into a more enduring and significant situation. These two forsaken beings, a dog and an infant, had swiftly become integral to her existence. "They belong here," she stated succinctly. Diane grinned. "Based on my observations, I concur. Sophia is flourishing, and your home offers precisely the stability and care she requires." She closed her folder. Moreover, having a four-pawed guardian angel is advantageous. After Diane departed, Maria positioned herself on the floor next to Shadow, observing Sophia's slumber in her bassinet. "You have transformed my life," she remarked to the German shepherd, caressing his progressively healthier coat. "Both of you have." Shadow leaned against her, his warm weight reassuring and substantial, in stark contrast to the emaciated, half-frozen creature that had collapsed at her doorstep merely 2 weeks prior. His black eyes possessed the wisdom derived from hardship and survival, yet also reflected a newfound contentment. "Whatever transpires next," Maria vowed, "we confront it collectively." Night descended, accompanied by a torrential rain that eradicated the final traces of snow. The police cruiser stationed outside Maria's residence persisted, although the officer within grappled to sustain vigilance during the tranquil midnight shift. The case had become mundane, another night of unremarkable protective duty that appeared increasingly superfluous as the fugitive's trail diminished. Inside, the household slumbered tranquilly. Maria had ultimately installed a baby monitor, enabling her to repose in her bedroom, while Sophia rested in the nursery. Shadow, although possessing his own bed in the living room, had begun to sleep on the nursery floor after Maria finished the nighttime feeding and diaper change. His protective instincts precluded him from resting far from the infant. At precisely 2 a.m., Shadow's eyes abruptly opened, his ears oriented forward, detecting a sound inaudible to human perception. He elevated his head, his body tensing as he listened with acute focus. Something was amiss. Silently, he stood up, moving with a stealth that contradicted his still recovering state. He approached the nursery window, drawing back the curtain with his nose to see into the rainy obscurity. The street seemed deserted. The police cruiser remained in its usual position, its interior dim yet discernible. Shadow discerned the officer's silhouette, slumped sideways in a manner that elicited alarm in the dog's instinctual awareness. The officer was not merely at ease. Something was amiss. Shadow's focus turned to a motion at the side of the house, a silhouette emerging from the obscurity between the properties, a person advancing with calculated stealth toward the rear entrance. A low growl emanated from deep within Shadow's throat. He gazed at Sophia, resting serenely in her crib, then at the shut nursery door leading to the hallway. Having made his decision, he quietly descended from the nursery and proceeded downstairs. In the kitchen, Miguel Santos skillfully worked on the back door lock. The rain offered ideal concealment, obscuring any noises and vacating the streets of onlookers. He had devoted days to observing the residence from afar, familiarizing himself with its patterns and anticipating the opportune moment. The officer and the vehicle were effortlessly subdued. A swift tap on the window, a display of counterfeit identification, followed by a sudden blow with the butt of his firearm when the window was lowered. The lock yielded with a soft click. Miguel cautiously opened the door, firearm poised in his right hand. The residence was dim and silent. He was familiar with the configuration from his observation. The nursery was located upstairs, and the master bedroom was situated directly across the hall. The nurse would be asleep. The baby would be vulnerable. His plan was straightforward. Abduct the infant as leverage, compel Lucia to retract her allegations, and subsequently flee across the border. Should complications arise, the child would be deemed expendable, collateral damage in his pursuit of freedom. He entered the kitchen, cautious to be silent. Moonlight flowing through the window lit the orderly space. He advanced toward the hallway that led to the stairs and halted. In the threshold between the kitchen and hall stood a substantial shadow, more opaque than the encompassing darkness. For an instant, Miguel suspected his vision was deceiving him, conjuring forms from the void. Then the shadow shifted. A deep, resonant growl permeated the silence. The German Shepherd. Miguel had observed the dog in news stories, but had regarded it as a fabrication of the media, an embellished narrative centered on a stray that fortuitously found itself in the appropriate location. He had not considered its existence in his strategy. "Calm down, dog," he murmured, elevating his firearm. One shot would resolve the issue. With a rain obscuring sounds and the police officer incapacitated, no one would arrive in time. Shadow did not withdraw. Instead, he progressed gradually, his growl intensifying, his body descending into a stance of aggression. Miguel could discern his silhouette more distinctly now, larger and more formidable than he had seemed on television. The dog's eyes mirrored the scant light, two luminous points steadfastly focused on the intruder. Miguel aimed meticulously. He could not afford to miss. The moment his finger tightened on the trigger, Shadow surged forward, a dark projectile of fur and muscle. His diminished physique surged with adrenaline, harnessing the strength of his German Shepherd lineage, the protective instinct that had rendered his breed iconic. The firearm discharged, producing a muted sound due to the suppressor, yet Shadow was already in flight. Its teeth penetrated flesh, seizing Miguel's gun arm with bone-crushing intensity. The weapon fell to the floor as the man and dog collided with the kitchen cabinets. Miguel screamed, attempting to dislodge the creature clinging to his arm. Shadow remained resolute, the flavor of his adversary's blood inciting a basic protective fury. This was the menace. This posed a threat to his infant. Upstairs, the gunshot and disturbance roused Maria from her slumber. She instantly grasped her phone, dialing 911 as she hurried to check on Sophia. The baby, roused by the commotion, began to wail but seemed unscathed in her cot. Shadow was absent. Heart racing, Maria secured the nursery door prior to notifying emergency services about the break-in. The dispatcher verified that backup was already en route, activated by an automated officer safety alarm from the cruiser outside. Meanwhile, the violent struggle persisted downstairs. Miguel successfully delivered multiple kicks to Shadow's ribs, yet the dog persisted in maintaining its grip. Blood streamed from the intruder's shattered arm, diminishing his strength with every fleeting moment. In a state of desperation, Miguel seized a kitchen knife with his free hand, stabbing erratically at the dog's body. Shadow felt the blade penetrate his shoulder, yet remained resolute. This guy would not prevail. This man would not ascend the stairs. This man would never come into contact with Sophia. Sirens echoed in the distance, intensifying. Miguel recognized that his opportunity for escape was diminishing swiftly. With a final, desperate exertion, he forcefully struck Shadow against the refrigerator multiple times, the impacts resonating through the dog's already injured physique. The periphery of Shadow's vision dimmed. Pain threatened to engulf him. However, a force more profound than pain and more potent than suffering restrained him. The same resolve that had propelled him through a blizzard with an infant in his mouth. The same determination that had guided him to Maria's window. Red and blue lights illuminated the kitchen windows as police vehicles came to a screeching halt outside. Miguel, recognizing that his escape route was obstructed, understood that capture was now unavoidable. In a final act of spite, he plunged the knife with all his remaining strength towards Shadow's chest. The blade struck true just as the front door shattered open and officers surged in, weapons drawn. Miguel was subdued to the ground, the knife forcibly removed from his grasp, but the harm was already inflicted. Shadow relinquished his hold on the restrained intruder, reeling backward. Blood matted his fur from numerous wounds, the most severe where the knife emerged from his chest. His legs quaked, unable to sustain his weight. As officers secured the scene, Maria finally emerged from the locked nursery, with Sophia clutched protectively in her arms. Her scream upon discovering Shadow crumpled on the kitchen floor reverberated throughout the house. "Summon an emergency veterinarian immediately," she exclaimed, handing the infant to a female officer. She knelt alongside Shadow, her medical knowledge activating as she evaluated his injuries. "Stay with me, hero," she said, tears cascading down her cheeks. "Stay with me." Shadow's dark eyes, obscured by suffering, met hers. His tail thumped feebly against the floor once. Then his eyes shut. The emergency veterinary facility illuminated the pre-dawn hours as personnel labored fervently to preserve Shadow's life. Dr. Patel, contacted from home, directed the trauma team through a sequence of essential operations, including knife removal, bleeding control, and internal damage assessment. She reported multiple stab wounds, blunt force trauma to the ribs, and severe blood loss as her team prepared for surgery. He was already compromised due to his prior condition. It is a miracle he remains alive. In the waiting area, Maria sat stiffly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her clothing stained with Shadow's blood. Sophia slept in her carrier, unaware of the life-and-death struggle occurring behind the clinic's surgical doors. A police officer stayed with them, as protection was still required, until formal statements were finalized. Detective Morales arrived just before dawn, his own injuries from the previous altercation with Miguel Santos still apparent in the bandage on his forehead. He sat next to Maria, offering her a cup of coffee that she did not consume. "Santos is in custody at the hospital," he clarified. "Multiple fractures to his right arm, significant blood loss, and facing numerous charges including attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and animal cruelty." Maria nodded numbly. He arrived for Sophia. Affirmative. He would have succeeded, but for Shadow. Morales' voice softened. The officer stationed outside was discovered unconscious. He sustained a concussion, but he will recuperate. Santos had deactivated our security measures and would have gained unimpeded access to the residence had Shadow not intervened. He was aware, Maria murmured. Somehow, Shadow recognized Miguel's perilous nature and understood precisely how to respond. They remained silent for a minute, the gravity of what had occurred lingering between them. "Any updates?" Morales ultimately inquired, nodding towards the surgical doors. Maria shook her head, tears on the verge of spilling. "It is indeed serious, very serious." Sophia shifted in her carrier, emitting soft sounds that would soon escalate into cries. Maria gently lifted her, cradling her against her shoulder. The baby quickly settled, finding solace in the familiar embrace. "She is so perfect," Maria whispered. "I cannot fathom the potential outcomes had." "Do not," Morales interjected decisively. "Do not proceed there." Shadow intervened. "Focus on that." 3 additional hours elapsed before Dr. Patel exited the operating room, her scrubs stained with blood and fatigue evident on her face. Maria rose promptly, holding Sophia in her arms. "He survived the surgery," Dr. Patel stated, addressing the unvoiced inquiry. "However, the next 24 hours are crucial." The knife narrowly missed his heart by millimeters, but inflicted damage to a lung and resulted in considerable internal bleeding, compounded by his prior weakened condition and blunt force trauma. She hesitated. "I have exhausted all medical options." The remainder is contingent upon him. May I see him? Maria inquired. Dr. Patel acquiesced. In summary, he is in recovery and heavily sedated. She guided Maria to a secluded room where Shadow was positioned on a treatment table, attached to monitors and intravenous fluids. His body was largely enveloped in bandages, and an oxygen tube facilitated his respiration. He appeared exceedingly fragile, a mere shadow of the formidable protector who had faced an armed intruder mere hours prior. Maria advanced cautiously, with Sophia still cradled against her shoulder. She extended her free hand to tenderly caress Shadow's head, the only aspect of him seemingly unscathed by violence. "You have rescued us once more," she murmured, with tears streaming abundantly now. "You cannot abandon us, Shadow. We require your presence. Sophia requires your assistance." At the mention of the infant's name, a flicker occurred, a subtle motion beneath Shadow's closed eyelids. Maria observed and approached, bringing Sophia into Shadow's perceptual range. "She has arrived," Maria said gently. "Her safety is due to your actions. You must persevere, Shadow, just as you endured the blizzard, just as you struggled to recuperate previously. Engage in battle now." Dr. Patel, observing from the doorway, witnessed something extraordinary. Shadow's heart rate, as indicated on the monitor, had marginally steadied upon hearing Maria's voice, further steadying when she referenced Sophia. Even in an unconscious state, the dog was reacting to the bond with his family. "Engage with him," the veterinarian urged. "He is capable of hearing you." Animals react to recognizable voices, particularly those with whom they have formed a bond. Throughout the day and into the night, Maria remained by Shadow's recovery bed. Friends alternated in attending to Sophia in a nearby room, bringing her to Maria for feedings and permitting her to softly touch Shadow's fur, preserving the connection that appears crucial to his determination to survive. Hospital personnel provided updates regarding Lucia, who had been apprised of the night's occurrences and was exhibiting symptoms of enhanced mental clarity in reaction to the crisis. The initial inquiry she made, the social worker recounted, was whether the angel dog was unharmed. "She's praying for him." By dawn, Shadow's condition had neither improved nor worsened, resulting in a stalemate in his struggle for existence. Dr. Patel modified prescriptions, inspected bandages, and meticulously monitored vital signs. However, Maria was able to discern the apprehension concealed beneath her clinical facade. The veterinarian conceded he is quite frail during a private discussion outside the recovery room. The injuries would be grave for a healthy dog, let alone for one still recuperating from famine and exposure. She left the implication unarticulated. News of Shadow's life-or-death battle disseminated through media channels, generating a surge of public support. Hundreds assembled for a candlelight vigil outside the veterinary clinic. Online fundraisers for his medical expenditures surpassed their aims within hours. Children submitted handcrafted cards showcasing crayon illustrations of a valiant German Shepherd. "Shadow strong" and "Shall fight Shadow" trended on social media platforms. Throughout this period, Maria maintained her silent vigil, conversing with Shadow about various topics: the weather, Sophia's recent achievements, and plans for springtime walks in the park. Anything to sustain their connection and provide him with something tangible to grasp. On the third day, as morning light filtered through the recovery room window, Maria dozed in the chair beside Shadow's bed, with Sophia resting against her chest. She awoke to a gentle sound, not the beep of a monitor or the entrance of a staff member, but something different. Shadow's tail thumped feebly against the treatment table. His eyes were open, obscured by pain, yet attentive, concentrating on Maria and the infant. "Dr. Patel," Maria exclaimed, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "He is awake." The veterinarian hurried in, promptly assessing vital signs and pupil reactions. "This is positive," she affirmed, her professional demeanor breaking into a smile. "This is exceedingly good. He is responding appropriately." and his vital signs are improving. Shadow's gaze remained fixed on Maria and Sophia, his tail continuing its gentle thumping. With visible effort, he raised his head slightly, as if requiring a better view of the baby. "She is fine," Maria assured him, moving closer so he could see Sophia clearly. "You kept her safe, Shadow. You ensured our safety." The enhancement persisted consistently over the subsequent days. Shadow advanced from fourth nutrition to small meals, transitioning from continuous oxygen support to intermittent supplementation. His wounds commenced healing without complications, and strength progressively returned to his weakened body. Dr. Patel, informing Maria of his health 1 week post-attack, elicited her astonishment. "I have never witnessed a recovery rate of this nature. Medically, it is illogical. His injuries were sufficiently severe that numerous younger, healthier dogs would not have survived. Perhaps he possesses a unique motivation for living," Maria proposed, observing Shadow successfully sit up independently for the first time since the surgery. The veterinarian responded with a contemplative nod. "The connection between him, the baby, and you is remarkable. I have trained for 20 years and have never observed a connection of this nature." By the conclusion of the second week, Shadow was considered stable enough for discharge, returning home to pursue his recovery in a familiar environment. The media chronicled his return, catching photographs of the German Shepherd being tenderly transported into Maria's residence, his vigilant eyes promptly searching for Sophia, who awaited in her bouncy seat under the attentive gaze of Maria's sister. The reunion elicited tears from even the most jaded onlookers. Shadow, despite his frail condition and bandaged physique, laboriously made his way to Sophia's side, resting his head next to her diminutive figure. The infant, now almost 1 month old, appeared to acknowledge him, her tiny hands extending towards his fur, gentle coos substituting her typical cries. Life gradually established a new cadence within the household. With Miguel Santos in detention pending trial and public attention finally diminishing, privacy was restored. Shadow's recovery advanced concurrently with Sophia's development, with each milestone commemorated as the small family healed collectively. Spring has arrived, ushering bright, warm sunshine and new greenery to supplant winter's severity. As Shadow's strength was restored, short walks became feasible, carefully supervised outings to the backyard, and subsequently to the tranquil park at the end of the street. During one such excursion, while Shadow reclined on the grass and Maria sat on a nearby bench with Sophia, a hospital social worker approached with an update. Lucia Mendez had finalized her initial psychiatric treatment and was prepared for a supervised visit with her daughter. The social worker explained, "She has made remarkable progress. The medication has stabilized her health, and therapy has assisted her in processing the trauma associated with her relationship with Miguel and the events surrounding Sophia's birth." Maria experienced ambivalent emotions regarding the situation. She had come to cherish Sophia as her own, yet she saw the need of preserving the bond with the infant's biological mother, particularly one motivated by profound love rather than neglect. "When would this occur?" she inquired, observing Shadow pursue a butterfly with slight curiosity, indicating a symptom of his recuperating health. "Tomorrow, if you are agreeable, at the hospital in a monitored environment." And Shadow, Lucia has a significant connection between him and Sophia's safety. The social worker paused. Typically, animals would not be allowed. However, due to the exceptional circumstances, I will facilitate special authorization. The meeting occurred in a small private chamber at Mercy General. Lucia, noticeably anxious yet focused, awaited Maria's arrival, who entered carrying Sophia in her arms, with Shadow cautiously accompanying them, his protective demeanor apparent despite his recovering physique. Upon seeing her daughter, Lucia's tears cascaded down her face. "She is beautiful," she murmured. "She has grown significantly." With social workers and a psychiatric nurse present, Maria carefully placed Sophia in her mother's embrace. The infant examined Lucia's face with curiosity before nestling comfortably against her chest. "Thank you," Lucia expressed to Maria, her voice laden with emotion, "for caring for her in my absence, for loving her." "She is easy to love," Maria responded candidly. Lucia's attention then turned to Shadow, who sat attentively next Maria, observing the exchange with keen eyes. "And you," she addressed the dog, "my angel, you fulfilled my prayer precisely." To everyone's astonishment, Shadow rose and approached Lucia and Sophia, his movements intentional yet non-threatening. He cautiously sniffed the baby, then gently rested his head against Lucia's knee, a gesture of acceptance and connection that transcended the chaos that had united them all. Through tears, Lucia reached down to caress his head. "You comprehend, do you not? You consistently did." The visit signified the commencement of a new chapter. As Lucia progressed in her treatment, she engaged in Sophia's life through regular supervised visits. The court designated Maria as Sophia's legal guardian, allowing for Lucia's gradual involvement as her mental health improved. Miguel Santos, confronted with numerous felony charges, accepted a plea agreement that mandates a 20-year incarceration, prohibiting any future contact with Lucia or Sophia. The menace he posed has diminished into recollection, supplanted by the assurance of legal safeguards and Shadow's steadfast vigilance. By Sophia's first birthday, Shadow had completely recuperated, his coat lustrous, his physique robust, and his dark eyes radiant with intellect and satisfaction. Lucia, currently residing in a transitional housing program and employed part-time, collaborated with Maria to organize a modest celebration in the backyard. As Sophia took her initial hesitant steps from Maria's grasp toward Lucia's extended arms, Shadow observed from a distance, tail wagging with an unmistakable sense of pride. When the infant wobbled and lost her balance, it was Shadow who promptly moved to her side, offering a stable support for a small hand to grasp as she regained her footing. "It's remarkable," Lucia remarked, seeing the relationship. "It's as if he anticipates her needs before she is even aware of them." "He consistently has," Maria concurred. Subsequently, as the three women, Maria, Lucia, and Elena, engaged in conversation over cake and coffee, Sophia slumbered on a blanket in the shade, with Shadow lying vigilantly beside her. A year had altered them all, mending both overt and covert wounds, forging unforeseen connections, and redefining the essence of family. The social worker informed Maria on her previous visit that the court date for the final guardianship arrangement is next week. Given Lucia's growth and Maria's ongoing involvement, the judge is likely to approve the shared arrangement they have proposed. It was not a conventional solution, but their circumstances had never been typical. Sophia would primarily reside with Maria, while Lucia would have regular visitation as she continued her recovery, an arrangement that respected both the biological connection and the bonds forged through crisis and care. Shadow's role within the family had never been in doubt. From stray to savior, from abandoned to indispensable, his journey had become intertwined with theirs. As evening descended upon the birthday celebration, Maria found a moment alone with Shadow while Lucia prepared Sophia for the drive back to her housing program. "You changed everything," she told him, scratching behind his ears in his preferred spot. "That night in the snow, you didn't just save Sophia, you saved all of us." Shadow leaned against her, his warm weight solid and reassuring. In his black eyes, Maria perceived not merely brilliance, but a profound knowledge derived from suffering and survival, from the indomitable connection established when one fractured soul identifies another and resolutely refuses to allow it to diminish. A year prior, he had been famished and isolated, struggling for each breath in a frigid alley. He now reclined in a sunlit garden, encircled by the family he had forged by an act of extraordinary bravery. Maria did not subscribe to the notion of fairy tales or ideal conclusions. As a nurse, she was acutely aware of the fragility of life, the intricacies of healing, and the continuous process of recovery. Challenges lay ahead for each of them. Lucia's ongoing mental health journey, Sophia's eventual inquiries regarding her origins, and Shadow's gradual aging. As she observed Shadow approach Lucia and Sophia returning from the home, his tail wagging softly and his steps confident and robust, Maria acknowledged the miracle bestowed upon them all. Not an ending, but a beginning, built upon the foundation of an extraordinary decision made on the coldest night by the most unexpected hero. "Come on, Shadow," she called, rising from her seat. "Let us return home." The German shepherd glanced back at her, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Then, with the poise that had sustained him through snowstorms and conflicts, neglect and rehabilitation, he guided his family through the garden gate and towards the residence that had, against all expectations, become precisely where they all belonged. This remarkable true narrative of love, bravery, and the indomitable connection between a dog and an infant has resonated with millions globally. If it stirred your emotions, kindly share it with someone significant. Remember, occasionally angels possess four paws, and heroes manifest in the most unforeseen ways. Where are you viewing from? Please inform us in the comments.